Welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Kimberlie Acosta. Paul Demain will be back with you on Monday, April 6th. Many of the stories viewed here can be found at our websites, IndianCountryNews.com or IndianCountryTV.com. Here is the news for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. A witness for the University of Colorado says a professor fired on plagiarism allegations amid an uproar about his comments regarding September 11th victim was treated fairly. A professor who helped investigate allegations against Ward Churchill says a faculty committee wasn't a rubber stamp for the administration. Don Morley, a communications professor at CU Colorado Springs, testified March 27th during the third week of the trial in a lawsuit against the school. Churchill is suing to get his job back. He claims that the school used the pretext of misconduct to fire him in the retaliation for his controversial essay, in which he likened victims of September 11th to a Nazi. The essay, widely publicized in January 2005, set off a firestorm for months. The committee absolved Churchill of several allegations when the wrongdoing didn't rise to the committee's higher standard of clear and convincing evidence for misconduct. But Morley said what the committee did find in terms of misconduct merited firing the former ethnic studies professor. The Anishinaabe Nation is working to ensure that a change of sales tax in Ontario will respect First Nations exemption of taxation that is entrenched under the law and in the treaties. Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council Chief John Bocage has petitioned the Government of Ontario to take part in the taxation reform process. Minister of Finance Dwight Duncan recently introduced the 2009 Ontario budget, which unveiled a plan to sign an accord with the federal government to reform and harmonize the 8% provincial retail sales tax with a 5% federal goods and services tax. The First Nations in Ontario may be willing to support this taxation reform, provided it respects our rights to tax exemption and improves the way in which that exemption is processed, said Grand Council Chief Bocage. Senator Mike Crapo finally has something to show for more than 8 years of working to preserve the rivers, deep canyons, high desert ecosystem, and scenic splendor of the Oweehee Canyon lands. The U.S. House approved a massive public lands bill this week that included Crapo's legislation to designate more than 500,000 acres of new wilderness in a remote corner of southwestern Idaho. The bill passed the Senate last week and is awaiting President Obama's signature. "I have a smile on my face," says Crapo. "This is one of those beautiful places. This is the land that needed to be preserved." Several times in the last 2 years, Congress failed to approve the bill despite broad support among a range of interest groups in Idaho. Crapo praised the ranchers, conservationists, private landowners, county leaders, and Shoshone Paiute officials for putting aside past differences and making the compromises necessary to pass the bill. A man accused of illegally selling fans made of eagle feathers has pled not guilty in a U.S. District Court in Portland, Oregon. Reginald Dale Akeen, 33, also known as J.J. Lone Lodge, was arrested in Albuquerque, New Mexico on March 12th and indicted in Portland. A complaint filed during March alleged that Akeen and a co-conspirator in Warm Springs, Oregon, made several sales of eagle feathers to an undercover agent, including 2 fans made from juvenile golden eagle feathers. During the hearing, Judge Donald Ashmashkes upheld an earlier decision that Akeen not travel outside of New Mexico, where he lives, and Portland, where he is required to attend court proceedings. For Akeen, an American Indian, the decision means he will not be allowed to travel to powwows elsewhere in the U.S. while his case is pending. The U.S. Department of Justice identified the other 3 as Ricky Sam Wachamwa, Alfred L. Hawk Jr., and William Wasisi. Charges against Akeen carrying prison terms of up to 2 years and fines of $250,000 per offense. A 2-day jury trial has been scheduled for starting June 2nd. A permanent plaque is being unveiled at the Arbuckle Historical Society to recognizing the late Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Harvey, a Sulphur, Oklahoma resident and a Chickasaw tribal member who received the Medal of Honor for valor during the Korean War. Harvey won the medal for his actions on March 9, 1951, in using his rifle and grenades to take enemy position in the face of machine gun fire, and suffered a gunshot wound to the chest in the process. Rayland Earsom, the museum director, said the plaque is the result of 7 months of research. And if you're on the powwow trail this weekend, April 3rd through the 5th, you can check out the 29th Annual Georgia Cherokees in St. George, Georgia, or the 3rd Annual Powwow on the River in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the 41st MSU Billings Intertribal in Billings, Montana, the 25th Annual Casino Anniversary Powwow in Fort McDowell, Arizona, the 9th Annual Youth Scholarship in Jay, Oklahoma, the 11th Annual All Nations in Torrance, California, the 31st First Nations University in Regina, Saskatchewan, the 5th Annual Crichton University All Nations in Omaha, Nebraska, the 12th University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, and the 8th Spring Thaw in Providence, Rhode Island. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank our underwriters and studio technicians for helping us with today's broadcast. Again, I'm your host, Kimberlie Acosta. Thank you and have a grand day.